England, 1820. The autumn rain fell upon Mayfair with the persistence of unspoken truths, drumming against the window panes of Ashworth House as if seeking entrance to secrets kept within. Inside the grand drawing-room, Henry Ashworth, the 5th Duke of Ashworth, stood with his back to the hearth watching the rain trace melancholic patterns down the glass. He was a man of 28 years, possessed of the sort of classical handsomeness that made mothers of marriageable daughters flutter their fans with renewed vigour at every ball. Dark hair that refused to be tamed entirely by his valet's ministrations, eyes of such deep brown they appeared almost black in certain lights, and a bearing that spoke of generations of nobility coursing through his veins. Yet for all his advantages, Henry felt peculiarly empty that October evening, though he could not have articulated why. "You are brooding again, my dear," came the gentle voice of his mother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashworth, as she entered the drawing-room with the graceful rustle of silk skirts. Lady Catherine Ashworth was a woman of remarkable elegance, despite her 50 years. Her silver-threaded auburn hair arranged in the latest fashion, her posture as regal as it had been when she first entered society 3 decades prior. "It is most unlike you to appear so melancholy. Has something occurred to distress you?" Henry turned from the window, arranging his features into a semblance of composure. "Nothing of consequence, mother. Merely the dreariness of the weather affecting my spirits, I dare say." The Dowager Duchess studied her son with the penetrating gaze that only a mother could employ, seeing through his carefully constructed facade as easily as one might see through morning mist. "The weather has been dreary for a fortnight, yet you have shown no such disposition until today. Come now, Henry, we have always been honest with one another. What truly troubles you?" A long moment passed before Henry spoke, his voice carrying a note of confusion that he himself found perplexing. "The Fairfax family has invited us to tea on Thursday next. I find myself reluctant to accept, though I cannot fathom why such a simple engagement should cause me any disquiet." "Ah," his mother said softly, settling herself upon the blue damask settee, with an expression that suggested she understood far more than her son. "And Miss Annabella Fairfax shall be in attendance, naturally." At the mention of that name, something shifted in Henry's chest, a tightening, a flutter, a sensation he could not properly identify. Annabella. Miss Annabella Fairfax, the daughter of his father's dearest friend, the girl who had run through the corridors of Ashworth Manor during countless summer visits, who had scraped her knees climbing trees alongside him when they were children, who had grown into a young woman of 21, with eyes the colour of spring lavender, and a laugh that seemed to make the very air shimmer with joy. "Of course she shall be present," Henry replied, his tone carefully neutral, "though I fail to see what bearing that has upon the matter. Annabella she is practically my sister, mother. You know this as well as I. Our families have been connected since before either of us drew breath." The Dowager Duchess's lips curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile, though she had the wisdom to hide it behind her teacup as she took a delicate sip. "Indeed, practically your sister. How very fraternal your concern." Henry frowned, sensing mockery where he could identify none in his mother's words. "You speak in riddles this evening, madam. If you have some point to make, I should prefer you make it plainly." "I merely observe, my dear, that for someone who views Miss Fairfax with such purely fraternal regard, you appear remarkably unsettled by the prospect of taking tea in her company." Lady Catherine set down her cup with precise care. "But perhaps I am mistaken. Perhaps it is merely the weather, as you say." Before Henry could formulate a response, the drawing-room door opened once more to admit Pemberton, the Ashworth butler, who had served the family for more than 30 years with impeccable discretion. "Your Grace," he intoned with his customary solemnity, "a message has arrived from Lord Fairfax. It is marked as urgent." Henry felt that strange tightening in his chest intensify as he crossed the room to accept the sealed letter. His hands, usually so steady whether holding reins or signing documents of state, trembled almost imperceptibly as he broke the wax seal bearing the Fairfax crest. His eyes scanned the contents once, then again, as if he could not quite believe what he read. The colour drained from his face with such rapidity that his mother rose from her seat in alarm. "Henry, what is it? Has something happened to the Fairfax family?" "Not happened," Henry said slowly, his voice hollow. "Or rather, something is about to happen. Lord Fairfax writes to inform me that Miss Annabella has received an offer of marriage from Lord Edmund Hartwell, the Earl of Thornbury. He looked up from the letter, his dark eyes wide with what might have been shock or something far more complicated, and she has accepted him. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share our channel. Your support inspires us to keep creating more stories of love, redemption, and breathtaking twists. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and together we'll continue sharing tales that warm the heart. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another of our historical stories. Click and let yourself be enchanted by another unforgettable tale. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the drawing room. Outside, the rain intensified, lashing against the windows with renewed fury. Lady Catherine sank back onto the settee, her hand pressed to her throat in a gesture of surprise that was entirely unfeigned. Lord Hartwell, but he is nearly 40, is he not? And I understood his temperament to be rather severe, most unlike our dear Annabella's gentle disposition. He is a man of considerable fortune and impeccable lineage, Henry said mechanically, repeating the very words Lord Fairfax had written. Lord Fairfax seems most pleased with the match. He writes that the betrothal shall be announced at a gathering this Thursday, the very tea to which we have been invited. It seems the invitation was not merely for tea, but to celebrate this joyous occasion. The bitterness in his final words was unmistakable, and it startled him as much as it did his mother. Henry stared at the letter in his hands as if it were written in a foreign tongue, as if the familiar loops and curves of Lord Fairfax's handwriting had suddenly become incomprehensible. Annabella, married, to Lord Hartwell, a man known throughout London for his cold demeanour and exacting standards, a man who had buried his first wife under mysterious circumstances that society whispered about but never openly discussed, a man whose estate in Derbyshire was said to be as cheerless and grey as his disposition. This cannot be, Henry whispered, and it was only in speaking the words aloud that he began to understand the violent rebellion occurring within his own heart. She cannot marry him. She should not. Mother, you must see that such a union would be disastrous. Annabella is all warmth and light and laughter. To chain her to a man like Hartwell would be akin to burying sunshine beneath stone. Lady Catherine watched her son with growing understanding, her maternal heart recognizing what his conscious mind had not yet fully grasped. And yet Lord Fairfax, who loves his daughter dearly, has consented to the match. One must assume he believes it advantageous for her. Advantageous? Henry's voice rose, passion breaking through the careful control he had maintained for so many years. He began to pace the length of the drawing room like a caged lion, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. What advantage can there be in condemning a girl of her spirit to a life of cold formality and joyless propriety? Hartwell cares nothing for music, and Annabella plays the pianoforte like an angel. He despises literature, and she reads poetry until the candles burn down to stubs. He tolerates no levity whatsoever, and her laughter is the most... He stopped abruptly, the words dying on his lips as realization crashed over him with the force of a tidal wave. The room seemed to tilt beneath his feet. His breath came short and sharp, as memory after memory flooded through his mind. Annabella at 17, reading to him beneath the oak tree at Ashworth Manor, while summer sunlight dappled through the leaves, her voice soft and melodious as she brought poetry to life. Annabella at 19, her eyes shining with unshed tears when he had told her, with careless kindness, that she was like a sister to him, that he treasured their friendship above all others. Annabella just 3 months past at the High Pemberton Ball, dancing with Lord Hartwell, while Henry watched from across the ballroom, fighting the inexplicable urge to cross the floor and claim her hand for himself, telling himself such possessive feelings were merely protective, fraternal concern. Good God, he breathed, the letter falling from his nerveless fingers to flutter onto the Persian carpet. I am a fool, the greatest fool who ever drew breath. Henry. His mother's voice was gentle, encouraging, drawing the confession from him as one might draw poison from a wound. I love her. The words emerged as little more than a whisper, but they carried the weight of revelation, of truth too long denied. Not as a sister, never as a sister, though I convinced myself otherwise for years. I love her, as a man loves the woman he cannot bear to live without, and I have realized it too late, far, far too late. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands, the very picture of elegant despair. The Duke of Ashworth, whose composure was legendary throughout society, whose control over his emotions was absolute, sat broken in his own drawing-room, undone by the recognition of his own heart. Lady Catherine moved to her son's side, placing a comforting hand upon his shoulder, saying nothing, allowing him the space to feel the full weight of his discovery. "When did it happen?" Henry asked aloud, though he spoke more to himself than to his mother. "When did the girl who pulled my hair and challenged me to races across the meadows become the woman I cannot imagine my life without? Was it that summer when I returned from Cambridge and found her transformed from child to young woman? Was it the winter when she sat beside me through the long nights after father passed, saying nothing, simply being present, her hand in mine? Or was it always thus, and I merely too blind, too determined to see only what was proper and expected, to acknowledge the truth? The heart often knows its truth long before the mind will accept it," Lady Catherine said softly. "You have always been so controlled, my dear, so determined to do what was correct and expected of your station. Perhaps you could not permit yourself to see Miss Fairfax as anything but a childhood companion, because to acknowledge more would have required action, commitment, a declaration that would have altered both your lives irrevocably. And now another man has shown the courage I lacked." The self-recrimination in Henry's voice was bitter as wormwood. Hartwell saw her worth and claimed her, while I contented myself with pretending I felt nothing more than cousinly affection. "What manner of coward am I?" "You are no coward," his mother replied firmly. "You are a man who has just discovered his own heart. But I will not lie to you, Henry. The situation is indeed complicated. Miss Fairfax has accepted Lord Hartwell's proposal. To interfere now, to declare yourself after she has given her word, would be to risk her reputation and honor. Society would not look kindly upon such actions. Then what am I to do?" Henry looked up at his mother, his eyes filled with anguish. "Am I simply to attend this cursed tea party on Thursday, to smile and offer my congratulations, while my heart tears itself to pieces? Am I to stand witness to her engagement, knowing that every day thereafter brings her closer to a marriage that will surely extinguish the very qualities that make her who she is? How can I do nothing when every fibre of my being cries out against this union?" The Dowager Duchess was silent for a long moment, her intelligent eyes thoughtful. When she spoke, her words were measured, careful. "You cannot simply do nothing, that much is certain, but neither can you act rashly. Miss Fairfax's reputation must be protected above all else. Any hint of impropriety, any suggestion that you and she have been meeting in secret, or carrying on a correspondence unknown to her family, would ruin her in society's eyes. Lord Fairfax would never forgive such a transgression, and Miss Fairfax herself would be compromised beyond repair. Then there is no hope." Henry's voice was flat, defeated. "I did not say that." A spark of something, calculation perhaps, or determination, lit Lady Catherine's eyes. "I said you cannot act rashly, but there may be a way to make your feelings known to Miss Fairfax, to give her the choice she deserves, without compromising her honor or violating the rules of propriety that govern our world." Henry sat forward, hope flickering to life in his chest. "Tell me." His mother rose and moved to her writing desk, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. "The rules of society prevent a gentleman from calling upon an unmarried lady in private, from corresponding with her directly, from declaring his feelings without the explicit permission of her father. But there are ways, discreet ways, for communication to occur between two people when circumstances demand it, ways that have existed for as long as there have been lovers kept apart by the strictures of propriety. You speak of clandestine meetings, secret assignations." Henry shook his head. "Mother, I could not ask Annabella to risk—" "I speak of letters," Lady Catherine interrupted smoothly. "Letters that express what cannot be spoken aloud. Letters that you would write and that I would deliver." Henry stared at his mother in astonishment. "You would act as a go-between? Mother, if such a scheme were discovered, your own reputation would suffer. My reputation is unassailable after 30 years as the Duchess of Ashworth, and more so now as the Dowager Duchess," she replied, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "More importantly, who would suspect an old woman of facilitating a secret correspondence? I have been friends with Lady Fairfax since we were girls together. It is the most natural thing in the world for me to call upon her, to take tea with her and her daughter. No one would think twice if I happened to press a letter into Miss Fairfax's hand during such a visit, or if she were to entrust me with a reply. We would be two mothers gossiping over china cups, nothing more. The audacity of the plan was breathtaking. Henry felt a surge of something he had not experienced since learning of Annabella's engagement. Hope, fierce and bright and terrifying in its intensity. But what could I possibly write that would make a difference? She has accepted Hartwell. Her father has consented. The betrothal is to be announced. Even if she were to learn of my feelings, what good would it do? She is bound by honor to proceed with the engagement. Is she? Lady Catherine's tone was pointed. A betrothal is not a marriage, Henry. Until the vows are spoken in church, either party may withdraw if they have cause to do so. Yes, it would create scandal. Yes, there would be talk. But if Miss Fairfax were to realize that her affections lay elsewhere, if she were to understand that the man she believed saw her only as a sister, in fact loved her with all his heart, might she not find the courage to speak with her father, to explain that she had made a mistake in accepting Lord Hartwell? You believe she may harbor feelings for me? The question emerged tentatively, as if Henry feared the answer. I believe, his mother said carefully, that I have eyes, my dear. I have watched Miss Fairfax in your company for many years. I have seen how her gaze follows you when she thinks no one observes, how her smiles are brightest when directed toward you, how she once excused herself from a ball in tears after overhearing you tell Lord Pemberton that you considered her a sister and nothing more. A woman does not weep over a man she regards with mere friendly affection. The memory struck Henry with physical force. That night at the Pemberton ball 2 years past, he had been speaking with his friend, laughing about the machinations of matchmaking mamas, when Lord Pemberton had remarked that Henry should simply marry Miss Fairfax and be done with the parade of hopeful debutantes. Henry had responded with practiced ease, declaring that Annabella was like a sister to him, that he could no more consider her romantically than he could his own blood relations. He remembered seeing a flash of blue silk disappearing around a corner, remembered thinking absently that someone must have been standing just beyond the doorway, but he had given it no further thought. Until now. Oh God. The words emerged as a groan. I said that where she could hear. I wounded her with my own thoughtless words, which makes it all the more imperative that she understand the truth now, Lady Catherine said firmly. But you must move quickly, Henry. The betrothal is to be announced on Thursday. That gives us less than a week to act. If Miss Fairfax is to break her engagement, it must be done before the public announcement. After that, the scandal would be too great, the damage to her reputation too severe. Henry stood abruptly, energy and purpose flooding through him where moments before there had been only despair. Then I must write to her at once. Tonight. I shall pour out everything I feel, everything I have been too blind to acknowledge until this moment. Not so hasty, his mother cautioned. Remember, you cannot simply declare yourself and demand she break her engagement. You must give her truth, yes, but also reassurance, understanding, and above all you must make clear that you will respect whatever decision she makes. Miss Fairfax must feel that she has a genuine choice, not that she is being pressured to exchange one obligation for another. The wisdom in his mother's words cooled the fever of Henry's desperation. He nodded slowly, understanding the delicate balance required. This was not some grand romantic gesture where he could simply sweep Annabella into his arms and declare his devotion. This was a matter of the heart, yes, but also of reputation, family honor, and social consequence. Every word he wrote would need to be carefully considered, honest yet respectful, passionate yet mindful of her dignity and agency. I shall need your guidance, he admitted. I have never written such a letter before. I scarce know where to begin. Lady Catherine smiled, the expression both sad and encouraging. Begin with truth, my dear. That is always the best place to start. Tell her what you have come to understand about your own feelings. Apologize for the hurt you have caused with your blindness. But most importantly, assure her that whatever she decides, you will honor her choice and wish only for her happiness. As the rain continued its melancholy percussion against the windows, Henry moved to his study, his mother's words echoing in his mind. He sat at his father's old desk, his desk now, though he still thought of it as belonging to the late Duke, and drew forth a sheet of fine writing paper. His hand hovered over the surface for a long moment before he dipped his pen in ink and began to write. My dearest Annabella, I scarce know how to begin this letter, save to say that I am writing to you in a manner most irregular, and I must beg your understanding and discretion. My mother, the Dowager Duchess, has agreed to act as intermediary for this correspondence, a fact which speaks to both her affection for you and her belief that certain truths must be spoken even when propriety might suggest otherwise. I have learned today of your engagement to Lord Hartwell. I understand that I should write to offer my congratulations, to express joy at your forthcoming nuptials, to wish you every happiness in your future life. And yet I find I cannot pen such words, for they would be the falsest I have ever written. Annabella, I must confess something to you that I have only this very evening come to understand about myself. For years, perhaps for the whole of our acquaintance, I have thought of you in terms that I now recognize were both deeply felt and profoundly mistaken. I told myself, and I told others, that I regarded you as a sister, that my affection for you was purely fraternal. I believed this with all the certainty of my conscious mind. But the heart, it seems, knows truths that the mind refuses to acknowledge. Upon learning that you were to marry another, I felt not the pleased satisfaction one might feel at a sister's advantageous match, but rather a pain so acute, so devastating, that it brought me to my knees. In that moment of anguish, I understood what I should have recognized years ago. I love you, Annabella, not as a brother loves a sister, but as a man loves the woman he wishes to spend his life beside. Henry paused, reading over the words he had written. They seemed inadequate to express the tumult in his heart, yet anything more elaborate might sound insincere. He continued, his pen moving more swiftly now as honesty poured forth. I realize how this confession must appear, how convenient it seems that I should discover my feelings only after you have accepted another man's proposal. I cannot blame you if you think this some selfish attempt to unsettle your peace or disrupt your plans. But I swear to you, Annabella, I write not to manipulate you, or to demand anything of you, but simply because I cannot bear the thought of you entering into marriage without knowing the truth of my heart. I remember the summer you turned 17, when you read poetry to me beneath the oak tree at Ashworth Manor. I remember thinking how beautiful your voice was, how it seemed to bring the words to life in a way I had never heard before. I told myself my pleasure in your company was merely the enjoyment of an old friend's society. I was deceiving myself even then. I remember the winter after my father's passing, when you sat with me through those dark, grief-stricken nights, saying little but being present, your hand steady in mine. I told myself I drew comfort from you as I might from a sister. I was blind to the truth, that your presence was a balm to my soul in a way no one else's could ever be. I remember the Pemberton ball 2 years past, when I spoke carelessly, thoughtlessly, within your hearing. I said you were like a sister to me. I saw a flash of blue silk as someone, you I now understand, fled from the doorway. I wounded you that night with words I believed to be true, and for that, Annabella, I am profoundly sorry. If I could recall those words, if I could erase the hurt I caused, I would do so in an instant. But I cannot change the past. I can only speak truthfully in the present and hope that you will forgive my long blindness to my own heart. I must say this plainly. I am not writing to demand that you break your engagement. I am not so arrogant as to assume that my belated revelation of feeling should overturn your plans or disrupt your life. You have given your word to Lord Hartwell, and I know you are a woman of honor who does not make such commitments lightly. If you love him, if you believe that marriage to him will bring you happiness, then I will respect that decision absolutely. I will attend your wedding with a smile, though it breaks my heart, and I will wish you every joy that life can offer. But if there is any part of you that doubts this match, if you accepted Lord Hartwell's proposal for reasons of duty or family expectation rather than genuine affection, if the thought of spending your life with him fills you with anything less than joy, then I beg you to consider carefully before you proceed. A betrothal is not yet a marriage. You're not yet bound by vows spoken before God. If your heart tells you that this engagement was a mistake, you have the right to acknowledge that truth and act upon it, regardless of what society might say. And if you were to find upon reflection that your affections might lie in another direction, might lie perhaps toward a fool who took far too long to recognize what was before him all along, then I would count myself the most blessed of men to have the opportunity to court you properly. to demonstrate through word and deed that my love is true and lasting, to earn the privilege of calling you my wife. But this must be your choice, Annabella, entirely and completely your choice. Whatever you decide, I will honor it. If you wish me never to speak of this again, if you wish to proceed with your marriage to Lord Hartwell, I will trouble you no further. But if you have questions, if you wish to express your own thoughts or feelings on this matter, my mother will continue to serve as our intermediary, and anything you wish to say to me will be held in strictest confidence. I shall be present at the tea on Thursday, as your father's letter invited my family to attend. I shall conduct myself with all the propriety the occasion demands, but know that whatever face I present to society, my heart is wholly and irrevocably yours. With deepest affection and respect, Henry. He read the letter through twice, making small corrections, then folded it with careful precision and sealed it with wax bearing his signet ring. His hands trembled slightly as he carried it back to the drawing-room, where his mother waited with remarkable patience. "It is done," he said simply, placing the letter in her hands. "My fate, our fate, now rests in her reply." Lady Catherine took the letter with reverence, as if she understood the weight of hope and fear it contained. "I shall call upon Lady Fairfax tomorrow afternoon. It is not unusual for me to pay her a visit, and I shall ensure that this reaches Miss Fairfax's hands with complete discretion. And if she wishes to reply?" Henry's voice was rough with emotion. "Then I shall retrieve her response and bring it to you with all speed." His mother's expression softened. "Try to rest tonight, my dear. I know it seems impossible, but you have done all you can for the moment. The rest is in Miss Fairfax's hands, and perhaps in the hands of Providence." Rest, of course, proved impossible. Henry passed the night in his study, alternately pacing and sitting in his father's leather chair, staring at the flames in the fireplace as they slowly died to embers. His mind conjured endless variations of how Annabella might respond to his letter, with joy, with confusion, with anger at his presumption, with polite dismissal. Each imagined scenario was more tormenting than the last. By the time dawn broke over London, painting the rain-washed streets in shades of pearl and gold, Henry looked as haggard as a man who had survived a siege. His valet, the ever-discreet Thomas, made no comment upon his master's appearance beyond a barely perceptible raising of one eyebrow as he laid out fresh clothes. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Henry attempted to occupy himself with estate business, with correspondence that required his attention, with a book from his library, but none of it could hold his focus for more than a few moments. His mind was miles away, in a grand house across Mayfair, wondering if his mother had successfully delivered his letter, if Annabella had read it, what her reaction might have been. It was late afternoon when Lady Catherine finally returned to Ashworth House. Henry, who had been watching from the window of his study like a sentry on duty, nearly knocked over his desk chair in his haste to meet her in the entrance hall. "Well?" he demanded, propriety abandoned in the face of desperate need. "Did you see her? Were you able to give her the letter?" His mother handed her cloak and gloves to a waiting footman with maddening composure before turning to her son. "Let us speak in private," she said, and led the way to the drawing-room with Henry following so closely he nearly trod on her skirts. Once the door was closed behind them, Lady Catherine's formal bearing softened slightly. "I saw her, Henry. I was able to deliver your letter directly into her hands during a moment when Lady Fairfax had stepped away to see about some refreshments. Miss Fairfax's reaction was illuminating." "Tell me everything," Henry urged. "Every detail." She went quite pale when I handed her the letter and explained what it contained. Her hands shook as she took it from me, not from fear, I think, but from strong emotion. She asked me if what I said was true, if you truly had feelings for her beyond friendship. I confirmed that you did, that you had only just come to understand your own heart. And? Henry could barely breathe. And she asked for time to read and consider your words. She promised to send a reply through me, but she needed time to think. That was when Lady Fairfax returned, and we spoke of nothing more consequential than the upcoming season for the remainder of my visit. Lady Catherine paused, studying her son's face. "But Henry, there was something else." When I rose to take my leave, Miss Fairfax accompanied me to the door. As I departed, she pressed something into my hand. "This." She drew from her reticule a small folded piece of paper. Henry's heart hammered against his ribs as he took it, his name written across the front in a hand he would have recognized anywhere. Delicate, graceful, unmistakably Annabella's. His fingers fumbled with the folds. Inside he found only a few lines, hastily written as if she had penned them in the brief moments before accompanying his mother to the door. Henry, your letter has turned my understanding of everything upon its head. I must have time to think, to feel, to understand what my heart is telling me. But know this, you were never a brother to me. Never. I shall write more when I can do so, without the risk of my hand shaking so violently I cannot form the words. A. It was not a declaration of love. It was not a promise to break her engagement, but it was hope, real, tangible, heart-stopping hope. Henry read the brief message 3 times, each reading revealing some new nuance he had missed before. You were never a brother to me. Those words echoed in his mind, beautiful and terrifying in their implication. She needs time, Henry said aloud, as much to himself as to his mother. I can give her that. I must give her that. Indeed you must, Lady Catherine agreed. But time is the one commodity in short supply. The betrothal announcement is in 3 days. If Miss Fairfax is to act, she must do so swiftly. The following day brought no further communication. Henry passed the hours in a state of suspended animation, unable to focus on anything beyond the possibility of another message from Annabella. His mother called again upon Lady Fairfax, but returned empty-handed, explaining that Miss Fairfax had been indisposed and kept to her rooms for the day. Indisposed? Henry repeated sharply. Is she unwell? Lady Fairfax mentioned a headache, nothing more serious, his mother assured him. But I suspect Miss Fairfax is grappling with difficult emotions and simply needs solitude to work through them. Be patient, my dear. Patience had never been more challenging. That evening, as Henry sat in his study making a poor pretense of reviewing accounts, a soft knock came at the door. His mother entered, and from her expression, he knew immediately that she carried another message. She gave this to me as I was leaving, Lady Catherine said, handing him a sealed letter. She managed to slip away under the pretense of retrieving a book for me. We had only moments, but she seemed resolute, I think, determined. Henry broke the seal with shaking hands and unfolded what proved to be several pages covered in Annabella's flowing script. He moved closer to the lamp and began to read. Dearest Henry, I have read your letter no fewer than 20 times since your mother placed it in my hands. I have cried over it, raged at it, and held it to my heart as if the paper itself might convey some comfort. And now I must attempt to compose a reply, though my thoughts are so tangled that I scarce know where one feeling ends and another begins. First, you must know that your confession has not surprised me as much as you might think. Or rather, the fact that you have feelings for me is not what surprises. What shocks me to my core is that you have admitted them. For years, Henry, I have carried a secret love for you that I believed would never be returned. I have watched you at balls and gatherings, have treasured every moment of conversation between us, have kept each memory like a precious gem hidden away where no one might see and mock me for my foolish devotion. When you told Lord Pemberton that I was like a sister to you, I felt as if my heart had been torn from my chest. I wept for 3 days, telling my mother I had caught a chill. In truth, I was grieving for a love I thought could never be acknowledged, let alone returned. I decided that night that I must make every effort to regard you as you regarded me, as a friend, nothing more. I tried, Henry. I truly tried to extinguish what I felt. But the heart, as you so rightly observed in your letter, knows truths the mind cannot alter. I continued to love you despite my best efforts to do otherwise. Every time I saw you, my resolution crumbled. Every conversation between us left me both joyful and devastated. Joyful to be in your company, devastated by the knowledge that you saw me only as a sister. And so when Lord Hartwell approached my father to request permission to court me, I did not discourage the suit as perhaps I should have. He is not the sort of man I would have chosen for myself if I were free to choose based solely on affection. You are correct in your assessment of his character. He is cold, formal, exacting in his standards, but he is also wealthy, titled, and considered an excellent match by society's measure. My father was overjoyed at the prospect of such an alliance. I told myself that perhaps this was for the best. If I could not have the man I loved, then what did it matter whom I married? At least with Lord Hartwell I would be settled, secure, removed from the torment of seeing you at every social gathering and knowing you could never be mine. I convinced myself that affection might grow with time, that companionship could develop even where passion did not exist. I accepted his proposal not out of love, Henry, but out of desperation and resignation. And now you write to tell me that everything I believed was false. You tell me that you love me, that you have perhaps always loved me, but were too blind to see it. Do you have any conception of what such words do to a woman's heart? It is as if I have been walking through darkness for years, and suddenly someone has lit 1,000 candles all at once. The light is glorious, Henry, but it is also blinding, terrifying in its intensity. Because now I am faced with an impossible choice. I have given my word to Lord Hartwell. My father has announced the engagement to our closest family and friends. The public announcement is to be made in 2 days' time. To break such an agreement would create scandal, not only for myself, but for my entire family. Lord Hartwell would be humiliated, and he is not a man who takes humiliation lightly. There would be consequences, social, financial, perhaps even legal, depending on how vindictive he chose to be. Yet how can I proceed with this marriage now that I know the truth of your feelings? How can I stand before God and vow to love and honor Lord Hartwell when my heart belongs entirely to another? Would that not be the greater sin, to enter into holy matrimony with a lie upon my lips and in my soul? I am torn, Henry. I am frightened and confused, and so desperately hopeful that it hurts to draw breath. I need to see you, to speak with you face to face, to hear these words from your own lips rather than written on paper. But I know that is impossible. The rules of propriety that govern our world will not permit such a meeting, not without proper chaperonage, not without risking the very reputation we are trying to protect. What am I to do? I have prayed for guidance, but heaven seems silent on the matter. I have examined my heart from every angle, and it speaks with singular clarity. I love you, I have always loved you, and the thought of binding myself to another man when you have finally declared yourself is unbearable. But love alone does not solve the practical difficulties we face. Even if I were to find the courage to break my engagement to Lord Hartwell, there is no guarantee that my father would consent to a match between us. He might be furious at my breach of word, might refuse to consider any alternative arrangement. He might even send me away to relatives in the country to avoid further scandal. And you, Henry, what of your position? You are the Duke of Ashworth. Your choices are scrutinized by society in ways mine are not. If you were to pursue me after I had broken an engagement, there would be talk. Some would admire your romantic gesture. Others would condemn you for interfering in another man's betrothal. Your reputation might suffer. Your standing in society might be damaged. Can I ask you to risk that for my sake? Yet even as I write these objections, even as I list all the reasons why this is complicated and difficult and fraught with danger, my heart cries out with a single unwavering truth. I want to be with you. I want to walk beside you through life as your wife, your partner, your beloved. I want to laugh with you and read poetry beneath oak trees and sit with you through dark nights when grief threatens to overwhelm. I want everything that marriage could offer between two people who truly love one another, not the hollow, joyless union I would have with Lord Hartwell. So I must ask you plainly, Henry, what do you propose we do? How can we navigate these treacherous waters without destroying both our reputations and our family's honor? You write that you will respect whatever decision I make, but I confess I am paralyzed by indecision. I need your counsel, your wisdom, your strength to help me find a path forward. Write to me again, I beg you. Tell me what you think we should do. Tell me if you truly believe there is hope for us, or if this confession has come too late, when the wheels of fate have already been set in motion and cannot be stopped. I await your reply with all the desperate hope and fear my heart can contain. Yours, always and irrevocably. Annabella Henry read the letter through once, then immediately read it again, his emotions swinging wildly between elation and despair. She loved him. She had always loved him. Those words alone were enough to make his heart soar, but the complications she outlined were real and daunting. He could not simply dismiss her concerns, could not wave away the very legitimate obstacles that stood between them and happiness. She is right about the difficulties, he said aloud, looking up to find his mother watching him with patient understanding. Even if she breaks the engagement, Lord Fairfax may refuse to consider an alternative match. He may view my involvement as interference and manipulation, and Hartwell, I have no doubt he would seek some form of retribution if he were publicly humiliated in this manner. All of that is true, Lady Catherine acknowledged. But are those obstacles insurmountable, or are they merely challenges that require careful navigation? You tell me, Mother. You have far more experience in the intricacies of society than I. Henry set down the letter and began to pace, his mind working through possibilities. How does one convince a father to allow his daughter to break one engagement in favor of another without causing irreparable scandal? His mother was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tapping thoughtfully against the arm of her chair. The key, she said finally, lies in ensuring that breaking the engagement appears to be Lord Hartwell's idea, or at least a mutual decision reached by both parties. If Miss Fairfax simply announces she has changed her mind, she appears fickle and unreliable. But if there is some reason, some incompatibility discovered, some concern raised, that makes both parties agree the match is unsuitable, then the dissolution of the engagement can occur with minimal scandal. But what reason could there be? Henry demanded. They have been courting for weeks. Any incompatibility should have been discovered long before the engagement was agreed upon. So unless, Lady Catherine said slowly, certain information came to light only after the engagement was settled. Information that, while not damning enough to completely ruin Lord Hartwell's reputation, would nonetheless give any reasonable father pause about entrusting his daughter to such a man. Henry stopped pacing and stared at his mother. What manner of information? I have lived in London society for 30 years, my dear. I know where all manner of bodies are buried, so to speak, and I happen to know certain things about Lord Hartwell that are not widely circulated, but are nonetheless true. For instance, I know that his first wife did not die of natural causes, as he claimed, but rather from injuries sustained in a fall down the stairs of his estate. The local magistrate investigated, but found no evidence of foul play. However, the servants of that household told a different story. They spoke of arguments, of Lord Hartwell's terrible temper, of his wife's fear in the months before her death. Henry felt his blood run cold. You are suggesting Hartwell murdered his wife? I am suggesting nothing of the sort, for I have no proof of such a serious accusation, Lady Catherine said firmly. What I am suggesting is that there is documented evidence of Lord Hartwell's volatile temper, of his first wife's fear, of suspicious circumstances surrounding her death that were never fully investigated. Such information, brought to Lord Fairfax's attention by a concerned friend, might give him cause to reconsider the wisdom of this match. But surely Lord Fairfax would have investigated Hartwell's background before consenting to the engagement. Men see what they wish to see, particularly when the alliance is advantageous. Lord Hartwell's wealth and title blinded Lord Fairfax to concerns that should have been addressed, but if those concerns were presented by someone whose judgment he trusts, by me, for instance, he might be persuaded to look more carefully at the man to whom he is entrusting his beloved daughter's future. Henry could see the elegance of the plan, but he hesitated. Mother, if we spread such information about Hartwell, even if it is true, we risk making a powerful enemy. He could retaliate against our family. Let him try, Lady Catherine said with surprising steel in her voice. The Ashworth name has stood firm for generations. I do not fear the Earl of Thornbury, particularly not when I am acting to protect a young woman from a potentially dangerous marriage. Besides, I would not be spreading rumors or gossip. I would be sharing documented concerns with a father who has the right to know the full character of his future son-in-law. And if Lord Fairfax does reconsider the engagement based on this information, if he allows Annabella to break her betrothal to Hartwell, what then? He may not immediately consent to a match between Annabella and myself. He may wish to wait, to ensure there is no appearance of impropriety, to let the scandal die down before considering any new arrangements. Then you court her properly, his mother replied. Openly, with her father's permission, following all the rules of proper conduct. You demonstrate to Lord Fairfax and to society that your intentions are honourable, that this is not some sordid affair, but a genuine attachment between two people who have known each other all their lives. You prove yourself worthy of her. It was not a perfect plan, there were still risks, still potential complications, but it offered hope, real, tangible hope, that had not existed before. Henry moved to his writing desk and drew out fresh paper, his purpose renewed, his determination absolute. My dearest Annabella, your letter has given me both the greatest joy and the deepest concern. Joy because you have confirmed what I scarcely dared hope, that your feelings mirror my own, that this love which has awakened in me is returned by you. Concern because I see clearly now the difficult position in which my belated recognition has placed you, but I want you to know that you are not alone in facing these difficulties. We shall navigate them together, and I believe there is a path forward that will preserve your honor, protect your reputation, and still allow us the possibility of a future together. My mother has information regarding Lord Hartwell's character and history that she believes your father should be made aware of before the betrothal is publicly announced. This is not gossip or malicious rumor, but documented concerns about his treatment of his first wife and the circumstances surrounding her untimely death. Lady Catherine intends to call upon your father tomorrow and share these concerns with him in strictest confidence, as one old friend to another, as someone who has your best interests at heart. If, upon learning this information, your father decides to reconsider the engagement, that decision will appear to be his own, based on legitimate concerns about Lord Hartwell's character. It will not appear that you have simply changed your mind, or that I have interfered in your betrothal. Any scandal will be minimized and you will be free to break the engagement with your reputation intact. Of course, this assumes your father will be persuaded by my mother's information. He may dismiss her concerns. He may decide to proceed with the match despite any reservations. In that case, Annabella, I must be honest with you. I do not know what we shall do. I cannot ask you to defy your father, to elope with me in secret and risk complete estrangement from your family. Such an action would cause you pain that I could never forgive myself for inflicting. But I can promise you this. Whatever happens, whatever your father decides, whatever circumstances force upon us, my love for you will not waver. If you must marry Lord Hartwell, I will remove myself from London, from England if necessary, so that my presence does not make your life more difficult. If you are free to break the engagement, but your father wishes you to wait before considering any new attachment, I will wait as long as necessary. If we are permitted to court openly, I will prove myself worthy of you with every breath I draw. You ask me if there is hope for us. Yes, my darling, there is hope. Perhaps not the certainty we might wish for, perhaps not the clear and easy path we might prefer, but hope nonetheless, and sometimes hope is enough to build upon. The tea party is tomorrow, that cursed gathering where your engagement to Hartwell was to be announced. If my mother's conversation with your father goes as we hope, perhaps that announcement will not occur. Perhaps instead we shall all gather for tea and polite conversation, and beneath the surface we shall know that fate has granted us a reprieve, a chance to begin again. I shall be there tomorrow, Annabella. I shall conduct myself with perfect propriety, as I promised. But know that my eyes will seek yours across the room, and in that glance I hope you will read everything my heart longs to say, but cannot yet speak aloud. Be brave, my love. Whatever tomorrow brings, we shall face it together, even if we must do so in silence and from opposite sides of a drawing-room. With all my love and devotion, Henry. He sealed the letter and handed it to his mother, who tucked it into her reticule with the same care she had shown the previous messages. I shall deliver this first thing in the morning, she promised, and then I shall call upon Lord Fairfax. It is fortunate that Lady Fairfax is visiting her sister in Bath this week. The conversation will be easier to arrange with only Lord Fairfax in residence. You are certain about this information regarding Hartwell? Henry needed to hear it again, needed to be sure they were not acting on mere suspicion or speculation. I am certain, Lady Catherine confirmed. I have friends among the servants of Thornbury Hall. The stories they tell are consistent and troubling. Whether Lord Hartwell was directly responsible for his wife's death or merely created an environment of fear that led to it, he is not a man to whom I would entrust the safety and happiness of Miss Fairfax. That night Henry slept better than he had in days, sustained by hope and purpose. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the autumn sun burning away the mist that clung to London's streets. He dressed with particular care, choosing a coat of deep blue that Annabella had once complimented, having his valet arrange his cravat in the complicated folds that fashion demanded. Lady Catherine departed Ashworth House mid-morning, armed with her information and her determination. Henry waited in an agony of suspense, unable to focus on anything. Every minute seemed to stretch into an hour. He found himself standing at the window of his study, watching the street below, as if he might somehow divine the outcome of his mother's visit through sheer force of will. It was past noon when Lady Catherine finally returned. Henry met her at the door, his heart in his throat. "Well?" he demanded, abandoning all pretense of calm. His mother's expression was unreadable as she handed her gloves to the waiting footman. "Walk with me in the garden," she said quietly. "The servants need not hear all of our business." The late October air was crisp as they stepped into the formal gardens behind Ashworth House. Lady Catherine waited until they were well away from the house before she spoke. "Lord Fairfax was receptive to my concerns. More than receptive, in fact. It seems he had harboured some private reservations about Lord Hartwell, but had dismissed them in light of the advantageous match. My information gave him permission, so to speak, to acknowledge those reservations more openly. And," Henry could barely breathe, "and he has decided to speak with Miss Fairfax this very afternoon. He intends to give her the choice. She may proceed with the engagement to Lord Hartwell if she wishes, now fully informed of his character, or she may break the engagement with his full support and blessing. He will handle Lord Hartwell personally, will make it clear that the dissolution is due to concerns about Hartwell's treatment of his first wife, and will ensure that Miss Fairfax's reputation remains untarnished." Relief flooded through Henry with such force that he had to steady himself against a nearby stone bench. "She will have the choice. That is all I could hope for." "There is more," Lady Catherine continued. "I took the liberty of mentioning in the most casual manner possible that you had seemed rather affected by the news of Miss Fairfax's engagement, that I had observed over the years a particular regard between the two of you. Lord Fairfax is not a foolish man, Henry. He understood my meaning. He asked me directly if you had formed an attachment to his daughter." Henry's heart stopped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that you had only recently come to understand your own feelings, that you had not acted upon them while she was engaged to another, but that if circumstances were different, you would wish very much to court Miss Fairfax with his permission and blessing." He was quiet for a long while after that. "Mother, you overstepped," Henry said, though he could not manage to sound truly angry. "You had no right to speak for me without my knowledge." "Perhaps," she conceded with a small smile, "but I am an old woman and I took advantage of that license. Do you wish to know what Lord Fairfax said?" "Tell me." "He said that he had long suspected you, and Annabella might suit one another. He said that your father had once remarked upon it years ago when you were both still quite young. He said that if Annabella were to break her engagement to Lord Hartwell, and if after a suitable interval you wished to approach him regarding a courtship, he would be pleased to consider the matter." The world seemed to tilt beneath Henry's feet. "Pleased to consider it? That is practically consent, is it not?" "It is as close to consent as a father can give before his daughter has actually broken her current engagement," Lady Catherine replied. "The rest, my dear, is up to Miss Fairfax. If she chooses to proceed with Lord Hartwell despite her father's concerns and her own feelings, then there is nothing more we can do. But if she chooses to break the engagement, then you have her father's blessing to court her openly and properly." "The tea is in 3 hours," Henry said, glancing up at the sun to judge the time. "By then, Annabella will have spoken with her father. By then, she will have made her choice." "Indeed. I suggest you prepare yourself for any outcome. Hope for the best, but steel yourself for the worst." Those 3 hours were the longest of Henry's life. He changed his coat twice, decided the blue was indeed the best choice, then changed into a different blue entirely. He practiced what he might say if given the opportunity to speak with Annabella privately, though he knew such an opportunity was unlikely to arise. He imagined her face when she saw him, tried to prepare himself for joy or disappointment or anything in between. Finally, mercifully, it was time to depart for the Fairfax residence. Henry and his mother travelled in the Ashworth carriage through the familiar streets of Mayfair, the short journey feeling interminable. When they arrived at the elegant townhouse, they were ushered into the drawing-room where several other guests had already assembled. Friends of the family, acquaintances, people who had been invited to celebrate what was meant to be a joyous announcement. But the atmosphere in the room felt strange, tense. Lord Fairfax stood near the fireplace, his expression grave. There was no sign of Annabella. Lady Hartwell, Lord Hartwell's elderly mother, who had accompanied her son, looked confused and somewhat irritated. And Lord Hartwell himself stood by the window, his face carved from ice, his jaw so tight Henry could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Ah, the Duke and Dowager Duchess of Ashworth," Lord Fairfax said with strained courtesy as they entered. "Thank you for attending. I'm afraid there has been a change in circumstances regarding this afternoon's planned celebration." Before he could elaborate, the door opened once more, and Annabella entered the room. Henry's breath caught at the sight of her. She wore a gown of pale lavender that made her eyes seem even more luminous than usual, but those eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been weeping. Her chin was raised, however, her posture straight and proud, despite the obvious distress she had endured. Her gaze found Henry's across the room, and in that moment everything he needed to know was written in her expression. Relief, hope, fear, and above all, love. Undeniable, unmistakable love. "Lord Hartwell," Lord Fairfax continued, his voice carrying the weight of difficult duty, "I have explained to you the concerns that have come to my attention regarding your first marriage. In light of this information, and after speaking at length with my daughter, we have mutually agreed that it would be best for the engagement between you and Miss Fairfax to be dissolved. I assure you this is not a decision we have reached lightly, and I deeply regret any disappointment or inconvenience this may cause you." The silence that followed this pronouncement was absolute. Lord Hartwell's face went from ice to fire, a flush of rage spreading across his features. "You would break our agreement based on servants' gossip and idle speculation about events that occurred years ago, events that were fully investigated by the proper authorities and found to be tragic accidents." "I would break our agreement," Lord Fairfax replied with quiet dignity, "based on concerns for my daughter's safety and happiness. The information brought to my attention suggests that your household was not a happy one, that your first wife lived in fear, and that regardless of the official conclusion regarding her death, there are questions that remain unanswered. I cannot in good conscience proceed with this engagement. And I suppose," Lord Hartwell said, his voice dripping with venom as his eyes swept the room and landed on Henry, "this sudden discovery of conscience has nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that the Duke of Ashworth is present. How very convenient that Lord Fairfax's old friend should bring such concerns to his attention mere days before the betrothal announcement. How very convenient indeed." "Lord Hartwell, you overstep," Lord Fairfax warned. "The Duke had nothing to do with this decision." "Did he not?" Hartwell took a step toward Henry, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Tell me, Your Grace, did you have a hand in this? Did you persuade Lord Fairfax to break his word to me? Did you fill his head with lies and suspicions about my character in order to clear the path for yourself?" Every eye in the room turned to Henry. He felt the weight of their gazes, felt the precariousness of the moment. One wrong word, one ill-considered response, and he could make everything worse. He forced himself to remain calm, to meet Hartwell's furious stare with steady composure. "Lord Hartwell," he said quietly, "I had no conversation with Lord Fairfax prior to today. I did not spread lies or suspicions about your character. What information Lord Fairfax received came from sources other than myself, and any decision he has made regarding his daughter's future is his own." "And yet you benefit from this decision, do you not?" Hartwell pressed. "The engagement is broken and now you are free to pursue Miss Fairfax yourself. A remarkable coincidence." "That is enough, Lord Hartwell." Annabella spoke for the first time, her voice shaking slightly but clear and firm. "The Duke of Ashworth has behaved with perfect propriety throughout this entire affair. You will not impugn his honor in my father's house." Hartwell turned his cold gaze upon her, and something in his expression made Henry's blood run cold. There was cruelty there, a capacity for vindictiveness that made him profoundly grateful Annabella would not be binding herself to this man. "You will regret this, Miss Fairfax. Breaking an engagement is no small matter. Society will talk. Your reputation will suffer. And when the Duke tires of you, as men of his station inevitably tire of their passing fancies, you will find yourself damaged goods, unmarriageable, pitied by those who once envied you." "I said that is enough." Lord Fairfax's voice cracked like a whip. "You will leave my house immediately, sir. You will speak no further to my daughter, and I suggest you take great care in how you conduct yourself going forward, lest I decide to make public the full details of why this engagement has been dissolved. I have been courteous enough to cite general concerns about incompatibility. I can just as easily cite specific concerns about your treatment of your late wife. The choice is yours." For a moment, Henry thought Hartwell might actually strike Lord Fairfax. The man's whole body vibrated with barely contained rage. But then, with visible effort, he regained control of himself. "This is not over," he said softly, dangerously. "You have made a powerful enemy today, Lord Fairfax. You as well, Your Grace. I do not forget insults, and I do not forgive betrayal." He turned on his heel and stalked from the room, his elderly mother hurrying after him with muttered apologies and obvious embarrassment. The other guests began to file out as well, recognizing that the afternoon's entertainment, such as it was, had concluded. Within minutes, only the Fairfax family and the Ashworths remained. Lord Fairfax seemed to age 10 years in the space of moments. He sank into a chair, his hand over his eyes. "That was even more unpleasant than I had anticipated. Father, I am sorry," Annabella began, moving to his side. "I never meant to bring difficulty upon our family." "Hush, child." He reached up to pat her hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. I should have investigated Hartwell more thoroughly before consenting to the match. I allowed my judgment to be clouded by considerations of wealth and title, and I nearly made a grievous error. You were right to question the engagement, and I was right to support your decision to break it. But Lord Hartwell's threats are the bluster of an angry man who has been thwarted. He will not act on them. He has too much to lose if I decide to speak openly about the circumstances of his first wife's death." Lord Fairfax looked up at his daughter, his expression softening. "You are free now, Annabella, free to make your own choice about your future, without coercion or pressure. Whatever you decide, I will support you." It was Lady Catherine who spoke next, her tone gentle. "Perhaps, Lord Fairfax, it would be appropriate for you to allow the young people a few moments of private conversation. Properly chaperoned, of course. I shall remain in the room, as will you if you wish, but perhaps we might retreat to that corner by the window and afford them the illusion of privacy. I believe they have matters to discuss." Lord Fairfax studied the Dowager Duchess for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But the door remains open, and you and I shall be present throughout. I will not have any further damage done to my daughter's reputation." "Of course," Lady Catherine agreed. She rose and took Lord Fairfax's arm, guiding him to the far corner of the large drawing-room, near the windows that overlooked the garden. They stood with their backs turned, offering Henry and Annabella a measure of privacy, while still maintaining the propriety the situation demanded. Henry moved toward Annabella, his heart hammering so hard he was certain she must be able to hear it. Up close he could see the traces of tears on her cheeks, the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the relief and joy that lit her features from within. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Annabella," he said softly, "are you truly all right? That scene with Hartwell was unpleasant but necessary," she interrupted. "And I am well, Henry, better than well. For the first time in months, I feel as if I can breathe freely. Your father said you were free to make your own choice about your future." Henry struggled to keep his voice low, mindful of their chaperones across the room. "Have you given any thought to what that choice might be?" A smile curved her lips, tentative, nervous, but genuine. "I have thought of little else since I received your first letter. I have thought about what my life would be like if I had proceeded with the marriage to Lord Hartwell, imagining long years of cold formality and joyless duty. And I have thought about what my life might be like if I were brave enough to reach for what my heart truly desires." "And what does your heart desire?" The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. "You," she replied simply. "It has always been you, Henry. From the time I was old enough to understand what love meant, it has been you. When you said I was like a sister to you, I thought my heart would never recover. But now, knowing that you have come to understand your own feelings, knowing that what I felt was not unrequited after all, it is almost too much joy to contain." Henry took her hand, a daring gesture even with chaperones present, but he could not resist the need to touch her, to make some physical connection that affirmed the emotional bond between them. Her fingers curled around his, warm and strong and sure. "Then may I have your father's permission to court you properly?" he asked. "Not in secret, not through clandestine letters delivered by my mother, but openly, as a gentleman courts the lady he hopes to make his wife. May I call upon you here? May I escort you to social gatherings? May I demonstrate to you and to all of society that my intentions are honorable and my affection is true?" "I believe my father has already indicated he would welcome such attentions," Annabella replied, her smile widening. "But perhaps you should ask him directly. He is, after all, just across the room. Henry glanced toward Lord Fairfax, who was still ostensibly staring out the window, but whose posture suggested he was listening to every word. Taking a deep breath, Henry raised his voice slightly. "Lord Fairfax, sir, might I have permission to formally court your daughter?" Lord Fairfax turned from the window, his expression stern, but his eyes warm. "You may, Your Grace, with the understanding that any engagement between you and Annabella must wait a suitable interval to allow the scandal of the broken betrothal to fade. I will not have society saying that my daughter leapt from one man's arms to another's with indecent haste." "I understand completely, sir. I'm prepared to wait as long as necessary to demonstrate the sincerity of my regard. Then you have my blessing. Court my daughter properly, Your Grace. Prove yourself worthy of her. And perhaps by spring, if all goes well, we might discuss a more permanent arrangement. By spring, 6 months away." It seemed like an eternity, but after years of blindness, after so many wasted opportunities, Henry could wait 6 months. He could wait 6 years if necessary, as long as he knew that Annabella would be waiting alongside him. "Thank you, sir," Henry said gravely. Then, turning back to Annabella, he lowered his voice once more. "I promise you, I will make the most of this courtship. I will prove to you every day that you made the right choice in breaking your engagement. I will show you that the love I feel for you is neither fleeting nor false, but deep and true and lasting." "I do not need proof, Henry," Annabella replied softly. "I know your heart, just as you know mine. But I will gladly accept your courtship, will gladly spend the coming months learning even more about the man I have loved for so long." They stood together in that drawing room, hands still joined, while autumn sunlight streamed through the windows and their chaperones discreetly conversed in the corner. It was not the romantic reunion Henry might have imagined, not the passionate declaration of love that poets wrote about, but it was real and it was theirs, and it was enough. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Henry called upon Annabella regularly, always properly chaperoned, always observing the strictest rules of propriety. They took walks in Hyde Park, with Lady Catherine trailing behind at a discreet distance. They attended the theatre, sitting in boxes where they could be seen by all of society, making clear that there was nothing clandestine about their connection. They danced together at balls, Henry claiming her hand for the maximum number of sets that propriety allowed. And society, as society always did, talked. Some whispered that it was scandalous how quickly Annabella had moved from one suitor to another. Others, perhaps more romantically inclined, sighed over the tale of childhood friends finally recognizing their true feelings. Lord Hartwell, true to his word, attempted to spread damaging rumors about both Annabella and Henry, but his efforts largely fell flat. He had made too many enemies over the years, cultivated too harsh a reputation. Few were inclined to believe his version of events, particularly after whispers began to circulate about the mysterious death of his first wife. Through it all, Henry and Annabella grew closer, learning each other not as childhood companions, but as man and woman, as potential life partners. They discovered that the easy friendship of their youth had deepened into something far more profound. They could talk for hours about anything and nothing. They shared the same values, the same hopes for the future. They challenged each other intellectually, supported each other emotionally, and found in each other a partner in the truest sense of the word. Christmas came, bringing with it frost and snow and the warmth of family gatherings. Henry spent Christmas Eve with the Fairfax family, and on Christmas morning, with Lord Fairfax's permission, he gave Annabella a small velvet box containing a delicate gold locket engraved with intertwined initials, H and A, forever linked in precious metal, as their hearts were linked in devotion. "It belonged to my grandmother," Henry explained, as Annabella lifted the locket with trembling fingers. Her family gathered around them in the warm glow of the Fairfax drawing room on Christmas morning. "She gave it to my grandfather on the day they became engaged, telling him that she carried his heart within it always. My father gave it to my mother when he proposed. And now I give it to you, Annabella, with your father's permission and blessing." Lord Fairfax smiled warmly from his position near the fireplace, having been consulted privately by Henry the evening before. Lady Fairfax dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while the Dowager Duchess looked on with barely concealed satisfaction at how perfectly her scheme had worked. Tears shimmered in Annabella's eyes as she clasped the locket to her chest. "Henry, it is beautiful. I shall treasure it always." "Not as much as I treasure you," he replied softly, mindful of their audience but unable to hide the depth of feeling in his voice. The winter months that followed passed with the sweet anticipation of a dream slowly becoming reality. Henry called upon Annabella with faithful regularity, always properly chaperoned, always observing the strictest rules of propriety. They took walks in Hyde Park despite the bitter cold, attended the opera and theatre, sat before roaring fires in the Fairfax drawing room, and talked until the candles burned low. Every day deepened their connection. Every conversation revealed new layers of compatibility and understanding. January gave way to February, and with it came St. Valentine's Day. Henry presented Annabella with a first edition of her favourite poetry collection, inscribed with words he had written himself. "To the woman who taught me that the heart knows truths the mind takes years to recognize, every poem within these pages speaks of you." Society, which had buzzed with scandal when Annabella first broke her engagement to Lord Hartwell, had gradually accepted the courtship between her and the Duke of Ashworth. The circumstances surrounding the dissolution of her betrothal to Hartwell had been delicately managed. Whispers of his unsuitable temperament had circulated just enough to make people understand why a concerned father might reconsider such a match without causing enough scandal to permanently damage anyone's reputation. Lord Hartwell himself had retreated to his estate in Derbyshire, nursing his wounded pride and making dark mutterings about betrayal that no one took particularly seriously. And then came March, with its unpredictable weather. Storms one day, brilliant sunshine the next, as if nature herself could not decide between winter and spring. The scandal had faded sufficiently, the proper interval had been observed, and Henry could wait no longer. On a mercurial day when rain and sun battled for dominance in the sky, Henry called upon Lord Fairfax in his study, his heart thundering in his chest despite his outward composure. "Your Grace," Lord Fairfax greeted him warmly, gesturing to a chair. "To what do I owe this pleasure? Annabella is in the music room if you are hoping to see her." "Actually, sir, it is you I wished to speak with." Henry remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. Sufficient time has passed since the dissolution of Annabella's previous engagement. The scandal has largely faded. Society has accepted our courtship, and I can wait no longer to ask what my heart has been screaming for months. Lord Fairfax's expression softened with understanding. "You wish to ask for my daughter's hand in marriage?" "With every fibre of my being, sir. I love Annabella with a depth I did not know was possible. She is my dearest friend, my intellectual equal, the source of my greatest joy. I promise you, on my honour as the Duke of Ashworth, that I will spend every day of my life ensuring her happiness, protecting her, cherishing her, as she deserves to be cherished." Lord Fairfax was quiet for a long moment, studying Henry with the penetrating gaze of a father who loved his daughter beyond measure. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "I have known you since you were a boy, Henry. I watched you grow into a man of honour and integrity. I knew your father, and I know he would be proud of the Duke you have become. There is no man in all of England to whom I would rather entrust my daughter's future happiness. You have my blessing to marry Annabella, assuming, of course, that she accepts your proposal." Relief and joy flooded through Henry. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for your blessing, for your trust. Go to her, Henry. She is waiting in the music room. I believe you will find her alone. Her mother and I thought you might appreciate a moment of privacy for what you wish to ask." Henry strode from the study toward the music room, where he could hear the faint strains of a pianoforte melody. He pushed the door open quietly. Annabella sat at the pianoforte, her fingers dancing across the keys with effortless grace. She wore a gown of soft rose silk, and around her throat gleamed the gold locket he had given her at Christmas. She stopped playing and turned, her face lighting up with the smile that never failed to make his heart skip. "Henry, I did not hear you arrive. Father said you wished to speak with him." "I did." He closed the door behind him and crossed to where she sat. "May I join you?" "Of course." She shifted on the piano bench, and he sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Annabella, I have just come from your father's study, where I asked him for permission to pose a question to you." Her breath caught, her lavender eyes widening. "Henry, I know I have not always been wise where you are concerned. I wasted years not recognizing what was before me. But I see you now, Annabella. I see you so clearly that I wonder how I ever saw anything else. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, but she was smiling radiantly. You see me. You have always seen me, Henry. He slid from the piano bench and knelt before her on the music room floor. From his coat pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring of breathtaking beauty. A perfect amethyst, the exact shade of her eyes, surrounded by diamonds that caught the light. Annabella Fairfax, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you marry me not because it is expected, but because your heart desires it as mine does? Yes, she breathed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Henry, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you. I have loved you for so long that I cannot remember a time when you did not own my heart completely. Henry's hands shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The moment the ring was in place, Annabella launched herself into his arms with such enthusiasm that they nearly toppled backward. He caught her, held her, and then, propriety abandoned in this perfect moment, he kissed her, pouring into that kiss every ounce of love and devotion he possessed. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. Your father will probably insist on a reasonable engagement period. I do not care if we must wait, Annabella replied. As long as I know you are mine, I can wait as long as necessary. I shall speak with him about a summer wedding, Henry decided. 3 months should satisfy society's expectations. I have waited long enough to make you my Duchess. As it happened, Lord Fairfax proved quite amenable to a summer wedding. He announced the engagement that very evening at a small family dinner, and within days, all of London society buzzed with the news. The Duke of Ashworth was to marry Miss Annabella Fairfax. The months leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Annabella spent countless hours with modistes and seamstresses, selecting fabrics and designs for her trousseau. The Dowager Duchess took charge of organizing the wedding breakfast, determined that it should be the social event of the season. Henry threw himself into preparing Ashworth Manor for his bride, overseeing renovations to the Duchess's chambers. But amidst all the preparations, Henry and Annabella carved out precious moments just for themselves. They continued their walks in Hyde Park, now with her hand tucked securely into the crook of his arm, and a ring glittering on her finger. They talked for hours about their future, about the children they hoped to have, the life they would create together, the legacy they wished to build. Finally, blessedly, the wedding day arrived. It was the first Saturday in June, and London had never looked more beautiful. The sun shone brilliant and warm, flowers bloomed in riotous profusion, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with joy. Henry stood at the altar of St. George's Church in Hanover Square, his heart beating so hard he was certain the entire congregation could hear it. The church was packed with everyone who mattered in London society. His mother sat in the front pew, already dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The organ began to play, and Henry's breath stopped entirely. Every head in the church turned toward the doors at the back of the nave, and then she appeared, Annabella on her father's arm, looking like something out of a dream. Her gown was of the finest white silk, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows. A veil of delicate lace covered her face, but Henry could see her eyes through it, those remarkable lavender eyes that sparkled with tears and joy and love. She carried a bouquet of white roses and lavender, and around her neck gleamed his grandmother's locket. She glided down the aisle with ethereal grace. But her eyes never left Henry's. Across the length of the nave, their gazes locked and held, and in that look passed every promise, every hope, every dream they shared. When she reached the altar, Lord Fairfax lifted her veil with tender care and kissed her cheek. "Be happy, my darling girl," he whispered. Then he placed her hand in Henry's and stepped back. The ceremony passed in a blur of sacred words and solemn vows. Henry spoke his promises clearly, his voice strong despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Annabella's voice trembled slightly, but her words were no less firm. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, when Henry was finally given permission to kiss his bride, he did so with reverence and passion. The congregation erupted in applause. The organ swelled with triumphant music as Henry and Annabella, now the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth, walked back down the aisle together, married, united, forever bound by love and law and sacred promise. The wedding breakfast at Ashworth House was elegant and joyous, filled with toasts and laughter and heartfelt speeches. Lord Fairfax spoke of watching his daughter grow into an extraordinary woman. Lady Catherine told embarrassing stories about Henry's youth that made Annabella laugh until she cried. Friends offered congratulations and predictions of long life and great happiness. But Henry barely tasted the elaborate meal. He was too consumed with awareness of Annabella beside him, his wife, his Duchess. Every time she turned to smile at him, every time her hand brushed against his, the reality of it struck him anew. She was his. As evening approached, Henry and Annabella slipped away to the privacy of the ducal chambers. They would leave for Ashworth Manor in the morning to begin their honeymoon, but tonight they would remain in London. Annabella moved to the window, looking out over the gardens bathed in golden light. Henry came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. For a long moment, they simply stood there, breathing in sync, hearts beating in harmony. "Are you happy?" Henry asked softly. Annabella turned in his arms, her face radiant. "I am happier than I ever dreamed possible. I have married the man I love, the man who sees me truly. I am the Duchess of Ashworth. Yes, but more importantly, I am your wife, your partner, your love. How could I be anything but deliriously happy?" "I wasted so many years," Henry said, regret colouring his voice. "No," Annabella said firmly, placing her hand against his cheek. "We did not waste those years. We spent them growing, becoming the people we needed to be to truly appreciate what we have now. Everything happened exactly as it needed to, exactly when it needed to. Our story is not diminished because it took time to unfold. It is enriched by it." "You are remarkably wise, Your Grace," Henry teased gently. "I am your wife now," Annabella replied with a smile. "You shall have to become accustomed to my wisdom, for I intend to share it with you frequently over the course of our very long and very happy marriage. I look forward to every moment of it." Henry captured her lips in a kiss that spoke of love, desire, promise, and forever. "Every single moment, my darling wife." And there, in the golden light of their wedding day, the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth began the greatest adventure of all. The adventure of building a life together, of creating joy from shared moments, of transforming what had begun as childhood friendship into the deepest, truest love either had ever known. Epilogue. Years later. The years that followed were filled with everything they had dreamed of and more. Children came, 4 in total, 2 boys and 2 girls, each one as spirited and intelligent as their parents. Ashworth Manor rang with laughter and life, its corridors no longer echoing with loneliness, but alive with the sounds of a family thriving. Henry proved himself an exemplary duke, managing his estates with wisdom and care, while Annabella became known throughout England for her patronage of the arts and her tireless work on behalf of education for girls. But more than their accomplishments, what people remembered about the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth was the love they shared, evident in every glance, every touch, every word exchanged between them. On autumn evenings, when the rain drummed against the windows of Ashworth Manor and their children were safely tucked into bed, Henry and Annabella would sit together before the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and remember that October day when everything had changed. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if Lord Hartwell had not proposed?" Annabella asked once, many years into their marriage, on just such an evening. "Every day," Henry admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you, to never recognizing what was before me all along. It terrifies me still." "But it did not happen," Annabella reminded him, tilting her face up to kiss him softly. "We found our way to each other. Perhaps not by the straightest path, perhaps not as quickly as we might have wished, but we found each other nonetheless. And that, my darling, is all that matters." Henry pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of lavender that still clung to her even after all these years. "You are right, as you always are. We found each other, and I shall spend every remaining day of my life thanking Providence for the gift of you. And I," Annabella whispered against his lips, "shall spend every day loving you more than I did the day before." They sat together as the fire burned low, and the rain continued its gentle percussion. 2 souls who had found in each other everything they had searched for: home, partnership, friendship, passion, and above all, the kind of love that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary stories. The kind of love that begins with blindness and ends with perfect clarity. The kind of love that was worth waiting for. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share our channel. Your support inspires us to keep creating more stories of love, redemption, and breathtaking twists. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and together we'll continue sharing tales that warm the heart. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another of our historical stories. Click and let yourself be enchanted by another unforgettable tale. With all our gratitude, Echoes of Romance. Dear reader, may you always remember that your worth is not determined by others' narrow judgments. Like Annabella, you are extraordinary simply by being yourself, whether society sees you clearly or remains blind to your value. The right person will recognize your true worth, not when you diminish yourself to fit their expectations, but when you stand confidently in your own truth. And remember, even the most carefully controlled hearts, when finally allowed to feel, can become the warmest and most devoted of all. The greatest love stories are not those without obstacles, but those where two souls find their way to each other, despite every barrier, every misunderstanding, every moment of blindness, and emerge stronger, truer, and more deeply connected than either could have imagined possible.